really happy to have you here to talk about your awesome film, Woof, and just talk about, it's like to be a filmmaker, and, the Oscars is coming up soon as well. And I really want to get your take on being a brother in the industry and how life is treating you. And also congratulations on your new addition as well, for people who may not know. You just had a baby. How long ago was it?
He'll be a month old on Monday.
Oh my God. So are you getting any sleep?
Yeah, some.
Oh, well, this is only 30 minutes. So after that, you can go take a nap or give your wife a break. So with that, we're going to get started, Yaki. But for those who may not know, it's going to be a spoiler alert. Just talk about what Woof, just give a brief overview of your film, Woof.
So Woof is the story of a family that discovers their son has been molested by their pastor. And it deals with the fallout from that. It deals with the church's cover-up of that abuse. It deals with the family's really inability to cope with it because they feel so betrayed by a man who has been, father, brother, almost God to them. And then also it just deals with the cycle of abuse as well, because here you have a man who was abused himself. Spoiler alert, huh?
Right.
But then because he was not able to get the help that he needed for that abuse, he wound up abusing someone else. So it just deals with the cyclical nature of abuse. And, it asks the question, how can we combat this abuse, not only in the church, but just in general, combat this kind of abuse, and really how can we stop it from happening?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I saw the film, the thing I thought of was Bishop Eddie Long. I'm pretty sure the film probably came out before that happened.
Actually was around, it's very interesting because when I came up with the idea for Woof, the Bishop Eddie Long thing hadn't happened yet. And I started writing it, and I was in the process of, raise money for it and just trying to get it all together. And I remember my mom, she called me or she texted me or something, and she said, you got to turn on the news. And I was like, what? And I did on, and there that story was. Here's Bishop Eddie Long in Atlanta, a man who I listened to. I used to listen to his sermons on like BET, and had a lot of respect for him as a pastor. And so seeing that, it did sort of wind up influencing some of the script, but the script really was already written. You sort of go in and add a few of those elements of that story into the script.
Yeah, to me, the moral of the film, there were so many different parts to the film. The first one is hurt people, pretty much. I mean, the pastor, he was molested himself. So like you mentioned, he really didn't deal with his demons of him being molested or the hurt and the pain. And it sort of trickled down. And that's what we see a lot of times in our community. We sometimes tend to not really focus on issues such as molestation or rape or child abuse and sweep it on the rug, and it passes down from generation to generation. And basically,
that's so true.
Really
I think
that.
Especially in the African American community, we have the tendency to not really want to talk about that at all, especially when it happens in the church, because our churches are, that's our sanctuary. That's the place where we go for help. Those are the places where we go to get prayed for. Those are the people who we really trust. And in some, way, when that happens, it makes us sort of look at ourselves and say, wait a minute, what didn't I see? How could I be so blind? Like, what were the signs, and why didn't I catch up on those signs? Or why didn't I, look around and have any inkling that this person was doing this? And a lot of times when we ask ourselves those questions, we just shut down and we just say, you know what, I'd rather not talk about it. I'd rather not even try to investigate what it is that I did wrong. I'd rather just act like it didn't happen at all. And really, when we do that, we open up the door for it to continue happening over and over and over and over again. I mean, we see this with the Catholic Church. I mean, instead of them really getting the help that some of these priests needed, they just sort of moved them from one church to the other, because they figured, all right, if we pay the parishioners off, if we move them, to some little parish in Ireland or whatever, then maybe people will forget about it. But ultimately, guess what they do? They go to Ireland and they molest those kids over there too. And before you know it, there's a footprint of molestation all around the world because the Catholic Church refused to stop this person from doing it, and like really refuse to reprimand them for what it is they did. And we see that in our community as well.
Right, that's so true. I mean, in the story, there are, elders in the church who, known for years that he's been doing it, and they still stick up because it's pastor. Everyone makes a mistake. And it's interesting when you hear that type of dynamic, because like grandmama in the story, at first she's like, don't go to police because, folks already don't trust the church already. I'm like, I'm like, okay, grandma, if that were me, I mean, the parents, the movie were like, just like myself, I'm telling you, if I had a kid and my child was molested by a pastor, my husband and I would have a gun up in the, we're going gang, but that's the reality of what can happen. I'm just keeping it real. I mean, what can happen when, okay, I'm exaggerating, but maybe not. I mean, but, it's your child and you trust that person. And it goes to show you, like, how much do you trust a pastor? Should a child be spending the night, at a grown man's house? I mean, things like that. And another part that was really interesting to me about your film is the dynamic of how people get busy, parents get busy, and as a child gets older, they may miss signs, like, the son was kind of distant. They may have thought, okay, he's a regular teenager. That's what teenagers do, and not really looking at the signs that maybe it was something more than him just being a distant teen.
I think parents can sometimes get so inundated with just trying to provide. You're just like, I'm trying to go to school, I'm trying to, his dad is a truck driver and he's giving his son everything that he can give him financially, because a lot of times, again, we believe that if we provide financially that we're being great parents. And we fail to sometimes understand that what our kids really need is not our stuff, but they need us. And there's that great scene in the film where, he looks at his dad and he says, Bishop loved me. He was there for me and you weren't. And for me, that really is sort of one of the central themes of the film, is that this boy gravitated to the person who was there for him. Even if it was a predatory relationship, it was at least a relationship. In his mind, it was at least a loving relationship. Right. Somebody cared for him. And that's what you see a lot of. I think of back to the Bishop Eddie Long thing. These weren't like, 8 and 9-year-old little boys. Some of these guys were teenagers, 15, 16. And you ask the question, well, he's 15, he's 16. He knows what he's doing. But the truth is, here's a man who was the father they never had. He was paying for some of them to go to school, I think. He was doing all of these things for them that made them feel like somebody actually accepted them and understood them, and that somebody really wanted to see them succeed. And in their mind, if this man loves me that much, there's nothing that he can't ask me to do that I won't do. And that's what predators do. They find your weakness. They prey on that weakness. They then find something about you that you need filled, and they fill it up. And then once they fill it up, they make you feel like you almost are obligated to do whatever it is that you want them to do.
Right, because in the movie, the young man, he's confused. Like, he's confused. He's like, I love him. He didn't really want to give him up at first. And another part of the film, which is something that we don't really typically see, was something we should do a little bit more in our community, is get help. He eventually sought after a psychologist. And that's something a lot of times in our community we tend not to do. If someone is, molested or raped or hurt, we just go take it to the Lord. And like in one part of when grandma's like, well, I just pray about it. I've been like the mom too, you know what? I don't like hearing that. Right now I'm just not in the mood to hear, Jesus is going to work it out. But that is reality. I feel like your film is really more reality. And typically we see in a lot of, do you call your film like a spiritual film or a Christian film, or just a film? Do you see that particular genre in your film?
I think it is a Christian film. Look, it's rough, it's visceral, it's raw, it's gritty, but it is a Christian film, because I don't even think that that's biblical. And I'm going to just say it, that you're supposed to just try to pray everything away and it goes away. There's something, I think about even the Catholic Church. I think they got it right in this sense. When you have something going on, you get to go and talk to another human being about it. And sometimes having that sounding board really helps. And like you said, in our community, it's taboo to go and say, hey, I might need some like psychiatric help, or I just need to talk to somebody. That's embarrassing. It makes you look like less of a human being. It makes you look weak. And so you bottle all of that stuff in, and it comes out in other ways. And sometimes those ways are not really, really good ways. And I think if we would really embrace this idea of, again, sometimes we just need to go talk to somebody, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of those issues, especially with this molestation thing, I think a lot of those issues would probably go away.
Yes, I think it's such a huge issue in a lot of communities, but especially in our community, because we just don't want to talk about it. We're just so afraid to talk about it. We're afraid of shame that someone would judge a little kid. Because getting back to the Eddie Long case, I mean, I remember, there was this whole debate in the Black community, like on Facebook, about, well, everyone makes a mistake and Jesus knows our heart. Jesus knows it. I'm sorry. I'm just not buying it, right?
I mean, look, I'll say this. Everybody does make mistakes.
Yes.
We all have our skeletons in the closet. However, again, I think when you just try to excuse something like that away by saying we all make mistakes, again, you open up the door for it to continue to happen over and over and over again.
Right. And just saying, take it to the church and let the church work it out, when no, that person needs to be in jail. That person needs professional help.
Exactly. And I think the key thing is professional help. This person needs professional help. Because that's an issue when you look at somebody that's, 9, 10, and 11, and you as a 35, 40, 50-year-old man, you want to be with that person. And they should probably talk to somebody about. And again, I wish that the church would really embrace that ideology of, like, you know what, we're going to send you to a professional psychiatrist. Sometimes, churches have this thing where the pastor counsels you. Well, these people aren't even licensed. They don't even really know what to say to you. They don't even really know how to deal with your issues. And they're giving you all this advice, and that advice is not helping you at all, because you need some real deal advice. You need somebody who has studied this, somebody who knows what they're talking about, to really counsel you and then lead you in the direction so that you can get the help that you need. And I would hope that the church will really begin to, again, open up those doors and embrace that.
Is that the reason why you came up with the idea for this film?
Exactly. I mean, I know people who have been molested by clergy, by coaches, by people that they trusted and that they loved. And the one thing that I saw, or the pattern that I kept seeing, was that these people were not given a permission. And I always say permission, because I think sometimes you have to have permission to get help. Because again, if you go out and you get help and somebody in your community finds out, or somebody that was in that church finds out, the first thing they're going to do, again, is say to you, oh, you're weak, or you know what you're doing? You're actually putting a stain on the church, or you're going to discredit everything that we worked for, whatever. And I don't think that's right. I think, again, we need to open up a forum where we can have this discussion, and then open up those doors so that people will feel comfortable getting the help. Because if I don't feel comfortable getting the help, I'm not going to get it. And again, I bottle it all in, and then it just explodes.
Right, like what happens to the young man.
Yes, when I made the film, I really wanted to create that forum so that when the film was over, which I really love, because when we toured with the film, after the film, it was almost like having a self-help group almost. I mean, people were there expressing themselves and talking about their own issues, and really saying, like, Carl, that was me, or that is me, and this happened to me. And I've never really been able to say that, in an open forum before I actually say that to anybody else. But now seeing it on screen, I know that I'm not alone. And I feel like now I can go get the help without being judged for it.
Right. Because, I mean, after you see the film, you think, I wonder how many young people, are young, being molested by an adult in a church, never saying anything because, well, they may not believe me. That's the pastor. And people do put pastors almost on a pedestal near godlike. And it's just hard for people to believe them. And hopefully people will look at the film and want to come forward and want to get the help that they need.
That's my hope. And, I think you hit it on the head when you said that sometimes we look at our pastors as almost godlike figures. And sometimes I think that's why this stuff happens, because you begin to sort of trust them in a way that I don't even think is right. It's a way where, for example, when I was an undergrad, I took this class called God and Human Sexuality. And in the book, one of the stories was there was a priest that would come to these people's house, and he would come at 9 or 10 at night, and they trusted this man so much. He would never do anything, that he would go upstairs at 10 o'clock at night to pray with their son. while they're down in the living room watching TV. And they never, ever, ever suspected that for years and years and years, this man was upstairs molesting their kid. And on top of that, because they allowed him to come up those stairs into that room with their son never felt comfortable enough telling them what was going on in that room, because in his mind, they allowed it to happen.
Right.
And that comes from the idea, again, that you're putting your pastors on this God-like pedestal. And there's only one God. A man can always fail you. I'm not saying you shouldn't trust your pastor. I love my pastors. These people have prayed for me. These people have loved on me. These people have supported me. But I understand that when it comes down to it, any person can do something to you. And I can't let that shake my faith in God. And that's what happens as well. When that person does something to you, because you really never had a relationship with God, you had a relationship with that person, it just shatters your faith totally. Right.
Like the father in the film, there's a scene where he kind of throws the Bible down because he's really upset about, what happened. Like, why, then there's another scene where it's another priest, like, why would God allow this to happen? And I really have an explanation for that. I'm not sure if your film really even answered that question, actually.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, I know. But things like that happen. But I also feel like, that at the end, what was really great is that you kind of wrap it up on a positive note, that the son finally did come forward enough so he could get his accuser arrested. Of course, the father kind of went berserk and had a gun and all that. You wonder, oh my God, did he hurt the man? But we know that didn't happen, which was really good. So when you do films, I mean, what's the typical message? I mean, I'm sure for most independent filmmakers and for most filmmakers, you have a message in the work that you do. What do you see your style of filmmaking as?
I've always been attracted to those films that really had something to say, that really dealt with those issues that we have a tendency to sweep under the rug, things that we, for some reason, either don't want to talk about or we want to act like those things are not happening. Because I believe that a film has the ability to really almost open you up in a way that nothing else can. You're there, you're in a dark room, you are confronted with these images, and when those images are put on screen the right way, they really get inside of you and they make you want to talk about those things. And so for me, I just want to create films that get people talking. I want to create films that deal with issues, again, that we normally would not feel comfortable talking about. And I also want to make films that really impact people, in such a way that when they leave that theater, they're not the same. And that it challenges them. It makes them, see the things in their own lives that they need to change. It also makes them see things in other people's lives that maybe they need to help those people change. So, that's what I want to do with film.
And with most of your films, I know you mentioned for Woof, you had discussions. I'm sure you probably had screenings at churches. Is that something you typically do, where you have screenings in locations that allow a dialogue to talk about issues?
I did not have screenings at churches. No, honestly, no church wanted this film to screen in their church. I did have churches that would come out to screenings that I had, but none of them really felt comfortable having this screen inside of their church because it was too raw. But yeah, once we kind of got off the film festival circuit, I was blessed to have a lot of organizations that dealt with sexual abuse or mental illness call me and say, hey, we want to screen the film. And then we also going to have psychiatrists or therapists there after the fact that can actually talk to people if they feel like they need to come and talk to somebody. And that meant the world to me. The awards are great and being on whatever platform is great. But to be honest with you, if somebody sees this film and they are impacted by it, but most importantly, that they can finally get the help that they need, that means the world to me. And that's why I make films in the first place.
So talk about your journey to becoming a filmmaker.
That's a hard one. Well, I guess it's not. Ever since I was a kid, I've always written stories, short stories, plays, poems, or whatnot. But I didn't really know people made movies. I loved films, but I didn't understand what a director was, producer was, that you actually grabbed a camera and you shot images. Because there wasn't no cameras around where I grew up. We didn't have cameras. And so when I was 11, The Hood came out, and that film had such a profound impact on me, because for the first time I saw people that I knew, people that lived in the inner city, saw them on screen giving some kind of humanity. People can look at Boys in the Hood and say, oh, it's a gangster movie, this and that, but it's really not. I mean, John Singleton is telling you why these people are doing what they're doing. He's showing you how people end up in those circumstances. He's giving you a sort of a portal into a world that some of us had never had the opportunity to see. And those images were so powerful to me because, again, I knew those people and I knew they were humans. Yet every day on the news, it was just like, oh, another black man killed somebody, or this drug house got busted into, or whatnot. And I said, you know what? I want to make films that do that. I want to make films that change the perception of people, and make people who don't know them see them in another light. And so, again, still didn't have a camera. When I got to high school, I was in a theater arts class, and my theater arts teacher, she had cameras. She let me take those cameras home. And I started making films then. I take my camera home. I invited some of my friends over. We would make those films on the weekend. My mom would cook spaghetti for us or whatnot. And I made films every year in high school. And honestly, I've been making a film every year since.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've made, 17 to 20 films already. And I plan to make many, many, many more. But, it was an interesting journey because, again, even when I got to undergrad, I was in a communication arts program, and there was no one that really taught film production. It was all, radio, TV, all of that good stuff. But I always had this burning desire to still make movies. And so my first year was a little bit rough. And then I think it was my second year, a professor, Fitzgerald, she showed up to the school. She was a graduate of Columbia's film school. And she really embraced me. She embraced the kind of work that I wanted to do. And she really helped me to start to make the films that I wanted to make. And I think she's, really responsible for me being where I am now.
Wow, that's awesome. Questions, you can, on the right-hand side, you can leave a message, and you can leave him a comment. So for my next question for you is, talk about finding the perfect story. And how do you come up with your story ideals?
Most stories that I come up with, they're very personal to me, and not in the sense that they happen to me, but that I had some kind of sort of visceral reaction to them. Kind of like with Woof, for example, this has never happened to me, but because I know people who it happened to, and I sort of watched them suffer through it, it made me say, wow, I want to make a film again about this, a film where we can talk about this. And most of the stories that I come up with, they come from that kind of reaction to something that I read, something that I hear, something that I see, something that someone tells me. And I usually sit for a long before I write a script, because I'm always, writing down ideas, or again, I hear somebody say something and I'll write a journal, or I'll type it in the notes on my phone. And then, after doing that for a while, I'll start seeing that, wait a minute, these pieces come together. This thing that person said to me 6 months ago almost lines up with this thing that somebody else said to me. And it also lines up with something that I have going on in my life right now. And I begin to put all those things together. And out of that, I start to create narratives. And, I can write a first draft fairly quickly, but then when it comes to get those subsequent drafts, it takes me a long time, because I really want to make sure that those stories feel true, that all of the characters, no matter if they are the bad person in the script, that they have some humanity, and that we get a sense of why they're doing what it is that they're doing.
Awesome.
Question.
So talk about, I know, the Oscars are coming up very soon, and, as an independent filmmaker, what are your thoughts about people boycotting the Oscars, and your thoughts about being a person of color in this industry right now?
It's hard, because I understand people's frustration. We historically included in the Oscars. Doesn't mean that there have been African Americans who won awards, directors, had their film nominated or whatnot. But if you just of the Oscars, very few of us have had the opportunity to have those types of given us. However, my thing is this: know that we've been dealing with that, and always asking the question, why are we, continuing to want to be included in a room that doesn't want us to be in that room? We, as a community, have the ability to make our own content
Right.
with enough money, but I think a Tyler and a Oprah and and Jada put her little deal online or whatever, her comedy Oscar race, but her and probably $500 million, I don't know what their net worth is, but there's so many people who have enough money to go out and say, you know what, take this $20 million, which is nothing to these people, and I'm going to find me 20 really good minority filmmakers, and I'm going to fund their. I'm not going to keep Hollywood to include me in this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own Hollywood. I'm going to create a body of work that I'm proud of. I'm going to find these great filmmakers, and I'm going to find these great, DPs and cinematographers and all of this minority talent, and I'm going to give them the money to get their stories out there. And the truth is, if we would do that, then Hollywood would have to look. I think about somebody like Tyler Perry, for example. I'm not a Tyler Perry fan. I'm not really a huge fan of Tyler's work. But let me tell you what Tyler did. Tyler said, you know what? They're not going to accept it. They're not going to give me the money for it, so I'm going to fund it myself. He funded it himself. We went to the movies and saw it. And guess what? They had to pay attention. And they had to give him what he wanted. And there are too many of us who have the means to make that happen for other filmmakers. So I wish that we would stop, getting online and having these conversations about, oh, the Oscars aren't including us. Who cares, to be honest with you? Yeah. It's not about the Oscars including us. We have stories that we can tell, that we need to tell, but we need the money to make those stories. So let's stop, griping about the Oscars, and let's write a check and let's get these stories out there, because we have the ability to do it.
Right. There are so many resources in our community. And I mean, it's one thing to boycott, but like you mentioned, it's another thing to say, okay, put your money where your mouth is. It's great to say we're going to take a stand, but, put money into resources so we can support these really awesome films and filmmakers that are already out there doing the work. They just don't get the same opportunity. Do you think that now, this is 2016 and with technology, do you think it's easier now to get into filmmaking as it was maybe even 10 years ago? Do you think it's better now?
Oh, better? No, it's easier.
Easier.
I think it's much easier to get into filmmaking because, you can get you a little nice camera that shoots a great image for $500 to $1,000, But the truth is, just because it's easier and there's more access, it doesn't mean that all the people that are making movies need to be making movies. I think one of the issues is that now that we can all go out and get a camera, we said, you know what? I get this camera, I can go buy me a camera package. We all have these fancy packages, but a lot of us aren't really taking the time to really learn the craft. You need to understand shot psychology. You need to understand a beginning, middle, and end of a story. You need to understand what makes a compelling character. You need to understand what makes a narrative really well done. And a lot of times we forego that because we're able to go down and get us a nice little camera. And I really, really, love the idea and love the fact that we're all able to make our work at our own pace. We don't have to wait on the studio. We don't need $1 million to do it anymore. We can do it for fairly cheap. However, we still need to make sure that we know the craft. We still need to make sure that we're taking the time to really develop our stories, cast these things well, shoot them well, so that when we do get the opportunity for somebody to come knocking on that door, that we have something good to show them.
Yeah, as someone who screens content for kweliTV, I totally agree with that. In one way, it's easy, but then in another way, people probably aren't learning the craft, that all the work that you did to learn. I even took a screenwriting class, and I learned so much about the transition, and there are certain marks in the film that basically turns the whole process the story around, like, oh, okay. So you just really learn, like, it's a real formula to writing a screenplay. It's not having an idea and just writing it down. Like, there's literally an actual formula to all films. There's the beginning, and there's the one thing that happens that totally changes the direction of the film. Like in Woof, it's when he tries to commit suicide, and they see the video. So so you basically learn that in school versus what a lot of people are doing, unfortunately. Before we go, talk about some of the work that you're working on right now. What are some of the projects you're working on?
Well, I have several things going on right now. I have 3 other films. Obviously, Woof is on kweliTV, but I have a film called The Second Coming, which is on Comcast on demand right now that you can check out. I have a film called Hope's War, which is on Showtime that you can check out. And I have a film called Dawn that is on HBO right now that you can check out. I'm also in the process of writing my next feature film called San Antonio.
Okay.
Actually, we'll be shooting in San Antonio, hopefully late summer, early fall. So I'm kind of developing that right now and trying to get money together and just trying to figure out which talent I can attach to it and how I'm actually going to be able to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Do you film most of your films in Texas? I know you're based in Texas.
I do, and actually, more specifically San Antonio, because I'm from San Antonio. And every time I'm writing something, I'm thinking of locations that I grew up in, or I'm thinking of, houses that I used to live in, streets that I used to go to, people that I know. And if I didn't shoot those films in San Antonio, they wouldn't feel as authentic. Mm-hmm. And so I always go back there as much as I can to shoot every film.
Mm. I think that's really awesome, too, because you're in Texas and you think about the film industry. It's LA, of course, New York is another hub, and now Atlanta. Talk about the reason for staying in Texas and how successful you've been able to be as a filmmaker in Texas versus like in New York, LA, or the new Black Hollywood of Atlanta.
Look, I again, like I said, I love Texas. I'm from Texas. And, I've been able to do really well here because I just have a big support system. A guy I've been working with since high school, Ralph Lopez, he's been my producing partner since I've been in high school. He's here. There's so many other people that are here that have supported my work. I'm able to access certain funds. I'm able to access certain equipment. I'm able to just, find an infrastructure here that has worked for me. And so I really don't have any reason to, look outside of here to make those films. It doesn't mean that I won't go and shoot in New York or LA or Atlanta, but I will always come back to Texas because there's some great filmmakers in Texas. There's some great storytellers in Texas. I lived in Austin for a long time, and there's a lot going on down in Austin. Yeah. And so I don't see any reason why I need to leave. I could make the same caliber of film here in Texas, probably for a fraction of the cost that I could make it in, New York or LA. So as long as I'm able to do that here, I'll stay right here and do it.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome. It really goes to show for anyone who's an aspiring filmmaker that they necessarily don't have to move to New York or LA to make it happen. They can make it happen right where they are.
Exactly. Look, it goes back to what we were talking about with equipment. It's like none of that stuff really matters. The truth is, if you have a good story, if you have developed that story, if you can find you a good cast, you can make a movie anywhere. I mean, I shot my last film with an iPhone, this phone right here, and it's about the story. It's about the message. It's about what I wanted to say. It's about the impact that I had on the audience. And that, is not exclusive to New York, LA, Austin, or anywhere. That's not exclusive to any location. It's really exclusive to you because that story comes from within you. And if you have the story there and you develop it well, you can shoot that thing anywhere you want to. Right. I think a lot of people, do think they have to run off to, again, LA or New York. And a lot of them just get swallowed up because they were no better in New York or LA than they were wherever they came from. Because, again, they didn't take the time to learn their craft. You learn your craft and you don't have to go anywhere because eventually New York, LA, London, wherever, they're going to come calling you because what you have is going to be so unique and nobody else is going to be able to do it.
Awesome. So this is my last question before we go. Talk about the challenges of being an independent filmmaker and what are some ways you think that those challenges can be rectified in the future? What are some ways we can fix it?
I think, especially as a minority filmmaker, it's just hard to get like the support that you need. It's really difficult sometimes to one, raise money, to two, really get people to understand like your voice and where you're coming from. That we always throw this term commercial around.
Mm-hmm.
Your film has to be more commercial, more commercial, more commercial. And every time I hear that, I'm gonna be honest with you, I hear more white, more white, more white, more white, or funnier, 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 funnier. When in fact, those stipulations are not put on other filmmakers. They can make the most dramatic film in the world, and it's just the best thing since sliced bread. But when we do it, we're marginalized.
Right.
We're not being open to everybody, or we're not appealing to a wide audience. And I think that's wrong. And I think that's one of the challenges that I've always been faced with, is really getting the kind of content that I have out there and getting the support for that content. Because it is, don't get me wrong, I know it's rough. I know it's hard to watch sometimes. I know it rubs people the wrong way. But ultimately, again, the purpose of it is really to make us think. And again, I would hope that people will really begin to embrace this kind of work and really help me and other filmmakers like me get this work out there.
Right. I think that's such an important thing that you say, because, for instance, like you mentioned earlier in the conversation, you state you saw Woof as a Christian film, but most of the times when you see a Christian film, usually there's laughter or there's some jokes mixed in with it to sort of tone down some of the seriousness of it. And so now people come to think that, okay, if it's a Christian film, it means someone's a man's dressed like a woman, and he has a gun, like the typical like type of movies. But I don't think that we need to always laugh. I don't think everything should be funny to get Black people to watch it. And your film basically shows that.
Yeah, again, I think that goes back to Hollywood and the images that they like to perpetuate about us. There's this whole idea of, Black people only want to see us, laughing in a dress, making fun of ourselves, shuffling and jiving and, dancing or whatever. Or I meant to say shucking and jiving. But there's more to us than that. There's so many stories that we have that we can tell. But again, we get marginalized and we don't have the opportunity to tell those stories. And the truth is, look, people do want to see those stories. It's just that when we make those films, we cannot get the money to market those films to a wide audience. And that's really where this whole idea of sort of the Oscars comes in, because it's more it's less about the Oscars and more about the idea that we are not able to like green light films about our experiences. There are no real studio heads that look like us. There's very few directors. There's very few people who can actually call the shots to get this kind of content out there. And until we get that kind of content out there, or until we get those people that can get that kind of content out there actually in those jobs that they can actually do that, we're going to continue to see these same images perpetuated over and over and over again. When you travel to film festivals, look, we come out in droves and we love this work. Mm-hmm. We love it. But when it gets into the theater, sometimes we don't even know that it's there, because there might have been like one like trailer or one poster somewhere, and it came, on at like 3 a.m. and nobody saw it. So we didn't even know that movie was there. And then they want to say, well, they obviously didn't want to see it because they didn't go. Well, we didn't go because we didn't know that it was there.
Right.
And so again, we need, for Hollywood, or we need ourselves to really begin to look for that kind of content that shows the totality of who we are, and we push that content out there so that those stories can get out there.
Yes, totally agree. This has been a really great interview. Hopefully, wish we could talk forever, but it's 10:40 Eastern time, and I know you have a baby to get to. So congratulations again. Before we go, tell people how they can find you and learn all about what you're doing.
You can find me on Facebook. I'm at Yaki80 on there. I also have a Woof page on Facebook, an Exodus Filmworks page on Facebook. Also on Twitter at I think I'm Yaki80 or Yaki1980. It's sad that I don't know that, but if you just type in my name, you'll find me on Twitter. But I post everything on Facebook and Twitter, all my screenings, all of my broadcasts, dates, every time I'm speaking somewhere. So you can follow me there. And please reach out to me.
Yes, thank you so much. It was a really awesome interview. Yaki Smith, the director of Woof, a really, really awesome Christian film about the realities of what can happen in the church sometimes. So thank you so much. I'm the CEO of kweliTV. You can watch Woof and many other really awesome films, documentaries, and web shows at www.kweli.tv. So until next time, thank you very much. Have a good night, everybody.
Before you sign off.
Yes.